Hi guys, here you can see I've passed four SOA exams in 1 year. So I took probability, passed it in May of 2024, passed SRM in the same month, May 23rd, and then passed PA or passed FM February of 2025, and then PA April of 2025. So that's four SOA exams that I passed in 1 year. And now, obviously, I've had many of these fails that actually helped me pass these exams. But one of the things I attribute this to is taking as many practice exams as you can. Practice exams is the most and best way that you can actually get familiar with these questions. A lot of it is just getting familiar with the types of questions that the SOA asks you. So getting practice exams experience through coaching actuaries and through taking them in a time-based environment is very critical. So that's one of the biggest things. The first time I took P and some of these exams, like it is significantly different than some of the exams that you even take, even during college. These exams, they require lots of time to understand the material, understand the concepts, and then applying them in a test-based setting. It's, a lot different than your typical college exams where a lot of the things are conceptual, they're not very calculation heavy. It's more lenient, uh, and the time pressure is not as much. So that's one of the main takeaways is to do practice exams as much as you can to get a better idea of what the test will actually be like. Now let's shift over to some exam FAM content. So the first thing I want to talk about is the entire idea of having whole life insurance or discrete or term life insurance, and then the way that you would pay for those is by through premiums. So we have our gross or gross future random variable net at issue, and that is equivalent to the expenses minus the cash outflow minus the cash inflow. So the cash outflow is the whole life insurance present value, or discrete or term or deferred. And then the inflow is the premium, so it's P times the annuity due. And so typically when there we do have equivalence principle, these two quantities are equal. The cash outflow at time zero will equal the cash inflow at time zero, the present value of those. So the benefits times the whole present value of the whole life insurance is equal to the premiums times the annuity due of the whole life insurance. Now, this is the same relationship if it's continuous or discrete or term. And this is just for premium, right? If we have a net premium, we don't have any other expenses. If we do add some of these other expenses, then that turns into a gross premium. So we can create that equation here where we have the present value of the death benefit. Now, this is essentially just when does the death benefit actually occur, and then the probabilities of those in each year. So if the probability of dying between 0 and 1 is, let's say, zero point 0.2, it would be zero point 0.2 times the death benefit and discount that with interest. And likewise for all the other time t periods. And if the question states net premium, that indirectly implies that it's using equivalence principle. Now, modified reserves, you can think of modified reserves as you have a certain amount of premium at time period one, but then after time period one, your premium changes. So it's only different for time period one. And the reason that it's different for time period one or zero, if you're starting at zero, is because that actually models the cost of insurance. So that is equal to the probability of death times the death benefit discounted 1 year. And so essentially you start over at time period one or the next period because the reserve at the next period is one. So you're starting over. Reserve recursion is all about the idea of how can we relate the reserve from the next time period to the reserve at this time period. So you take your current reserve, you add your premium, so that's what you're going to take in, accumulate by interest, that gives you the amount that you are going to use for two things. First is for the death benefit for the individual who will die. Second is for setting up the next premium if the individual will live. And so we have reserves. Reserve, you can also calculate reserve at different time steps, which will be the cash outflow minus the cash inflow. So death benefit minus premiums. So future expenses minus future earnings or income. One of the things about this exam, just in general about FAM, is you need to be able to manage your time very well. The same was true for P and FM as well. You need to be able to go through all of the questions and not remain stuck or spend a lot of time on a single question. You have around 6 minutes a question or 5 minutes a question about during this exam. So you really want to spend the first 30 seconds really making a decision on, do I want to spend time on this question or do I want to come back to it? What I figured through the practice exams that I've done, the strategy that works best is you read the question, you will have an idea of whether you know how to do it or you don't know how to do it. And if you've done a lot of practice, you will have an immediate idea if you know how to do the question or not. And if you do know how to do the question, then you do the question normally. And if you do get the answer, then you click on the answer and you move on. If you don't get the answer, you don't spend any more time, right? You don't spend any more time on the question. You simply mark the question because you know how to do it. You just didn't get the answer. You don't know how to do it. So you may just want to come back to it with a fresher mind, but you know how to do the question. You just didn't get the answer. So what you want to do is you want to mark the question. You will get back to it, or hopefully you will get back to it, but don't spend additional time with that question. So again, to summarize, you read a question, you know how to do the question, then you do the question. If you don't get the answer, you don't continue to do the question, you move on to the next question. Right? So if you do know how to do it, right? If you do know how to do it, so know how to do it, right? You either get the answer or you don't get the answer. Right? You get the answer, okay, great. If you don't get the answer, you move on to the next question and you mark it. You mark that, okay, I know how to do this, I might come back to it. So that it's all about managing your time effectively because each question is worth the same number of points. There's like three pilot questions on there, and you can't even tell which question is actually a pilot question. So there's a very good you could even be spending a lot of your time on a question that ultimately doesn't even count towards your score. So you don't, and there's no way to even consider or tell what questions are will be pilot questions. So you really want to be making sure that if you don't know how to do a question, or if you do a question, you don't get the correct answer, you skip it, you move on. Right? You do not spend more than 6 minutes on a single question. Right? Managing your time is effective and key in acing this exam. So those are some of the key tips I wanted to say here. And another thing is you want to think before you even write the work on the piece of paper. So what do I mean by this? A lot of times we just write down, even when we're like reading the question, or as soon as we've read the question, we start writing down, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But you want to think first. Pause and think, okay, what's the process about doing this question? And then start showing your work and going through the question. Don't as you're reading the problem start to do work and start to go through the question. Read the question first, think about the approach, like literally in your mind. If you can get to A to B to the solution, then only then should you start writing on the piece of paper and then going through the entire problem. If in your mind you can't get to the solution, like the methodology to the solution, then there's no point for you to even waste time to even try to attempt it writing and showing your work and writing on the paper. You might as well just move on to the next question. So you have to have a good idea of the entire methodology of solving the question in your mind first before you even start solving the question on the paper. So those are the couple of tips I've learned for FAM. And that's it for this video. See you in the next one.